and welcome to the International Inequalities Institute's research seminar on Wednesday afternoon. I'm delighted to introduce you to our two speakers for this afternoon, who are going to present their new work on women, jobs and growth as part of their South Asia research program. We have Dr. Franziska Ohnsorge, who is the Chief Economist for South Asia at the World Bank. She has a very illustrious and long career, both at the World Bank and outside the World Bank. Prior to joining the South Asia Department at the World Bank, she was the manager for the Development Economics Vice Presidency, and she was in charge of the flagship document, the Global Economic Prospects Report, which we're all very well aware of. And prior to that, she was in the office of the Chief Economist of the EBRD and the IMF. She's widely published both in peer-reviewed economics journals and other social science journals, and of course is very widely cited in our journalistic publications like the Economist, the FT, and the Wall Street Journal. So we're very happy to have you with us. And we have Dr. Maurizio Bussolo, who is the Deputy Chief Economist for the South Asia Department at the World Bank. He also has a very illustrious career, overseeing the research along with Franziska for the research program at the World Bank for South Asia. Prior to that, he was also in the Chief Economist's Office for Europe and Central Asia, and also in the Development Economics Prospects Group. And prior to joining the World Bank, he was at the OECD and the ODI, both based in London. And of course, before that, he was an academic, and partly with the government of Colombia. So yeah, both of them have publications. We've of course talked about Franziska's publication, but Maurizio's also very widely published on income distribution, growth, trade, and poverty in developing countries. So we're going to have a talk for about 45 minutes, and after which the floor is going to be open to our audience, questions for our speakers. So I'm going to now hand over the floor to Maurizio and Franziska. Start.
Thank you very much, Sanghamitra. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Also, for those of you who are watching it online. So the starting point of this of our work is that South Asia is a bright spot in the global economy. So if you're working on South Asia, you're working on the right thing. This is China after 10 years ago. The new China is India. You can see here in the chart, these are the growth rates by emerging market regions in the World Bank. Both backward-looking with the diamonds and forward-looking in the bars. And you can see that almost for a decade now, South Asia has been and will be the fastest growing emerging market region. There's a lot of buzz around it. And a lot of it is, of course, because of India. So this is growth in South Asia with and without India. It makes all the difference. Mind you, the other economies are also recovering much faster than expected. So it looks like all around, this is the engine of emerging markets and developing economies. Maybe not the global economy, but of emerging markets and developing economies. The problem here is it's not good enough. All the countries in the regions have articulated, all the countries in the regions have articulated goals to reach a higher income, per capita income, within the next 1 or 2 decades. In order to reach that, all of them have to achieve somewhere between 1 and 5 percentage points faster growth. So yes, this growth is good by comparison with other emerging markets. It's not good by comparison with the country's own goals. And that's what motivated us to look at this untapped potential. Where could that growth come from? And we have 2 parts of untapped potential, which is working women and openness to global trade and investment. And I think today we'll focus on the women, which is the work that Maurizio and his team led. And Andy was part of. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. So let me start by saying that it's a pleasure to be here, and a link to the, I can say, co-sponsor the International Equality Institute, the III or III, that inequality has finally become recognized as macro critical. It's important for growth. And what we focus on, as Franziska was saying, is that a specific type of inequality, gender inequality, and within that, to female labor force participation. Let me start with a couple of slides on motivation of why we think this is a crucial development issue for the region. And it becomes apparent when you look at these graphs. Starting from the left, you have the female labor force participation, somewhat the most recent numbers for the countries in the region, which are the blue bars, and the band is the interquartile range of female labor participation for emerging market and developing economies. And all, apart from Bhutan, are well inside the bottom quartile in that distribution. So on average for the region, about one third of working age women participate. So it's very, very low, especially when compared with the ambitious goals that were mentioned a moment ago by Franziska. Now, is this a problem? Yes.
Do you take questions during, like in a seminar, or you prefer at the end?
No, I can take some questions. Yes, no, we can do this.
You can tell us to stop
that's fine.
whenever you want. My question was just going to be,
Yes.
how do you deal with like casual agricultural work by women, which is obviously a huge issue, right?
Yeah, of course. So what the definition of female labor participation is contentious. There are a lot of different ways of looking at that, and especially we don't think that 70% or 60, 2/3 of women are just idle, not doing anything. They obviously do stuff. Now, what you see here in terms of the left-hand side graph there is the ILO definition of being recorded in a survey as you responding yes to the question, have you been working in the last week? So there are other ways of defining this, but this is the most internationally used and comparable, so that's what we use. Whenever we look at different way of defining this, we have a table in the report that looks at how each country looks at this in their official statistics or in their research. For example, India has now the labor force survey, the periodic labor force surveys that came out just recently, and it's quite higher than the number here, depending on which definition you take. It gets up to about 38 to 40%. It has been increasing more recently, but even that is still well below the 55 that is measured internationally with this comparable measure. Now, the other important thing that the center graph shows you is that this issue doesn't seem to be going away, at least in the 3 decades from the 90s to 2023 of sustained growth. There hasn't been much change at the aggregate level. Obviously, this is a regional figure. There's some variation across countries, and if we look at the most recent 10 years, there has been a pickup in female labor participation, but it has been, for 30 years, been fairly hovering around that 1/3, compared to the high level of participation of men, which is about 3/4, 77%, etc. By the way, maybe South Asia is not the lowest region, the region with the lowest participation. MENA, Middle East and North Africa is maybe below, but in terms of gap between men and women is the highest one. So there's the difference there. The last figure shows, okay, let's compare a country at a similar level of development, the famous U curve. And again, there you see that even controlling for GDP, the female labor participation is well below what would be predicted by the simple U curve relationship by 5 to 25 percentage points. So that's the first shocking reality of low female labor participation in the region at the aggregate level, national level. But what we did was, okay, maybe there are some spots within country that subnationally that we can see and learn and see if there is some high level of participation. It's interesting Dres and Sen wrote this book on India, Uncertain Glory, was in 2013. They talk about India, not the whole region, but they talk about India as, with this quote, islands of California in an ocean of sub-Saharan Africa. So are there islands of California in terms of female labor force participation within the region? And the broad answer is no. Looking at this administrative sub-region, there's no district or state in India that has above 50% of female labor participation. There's nothing in Pakistan above 30%. There's nothing in Sri Lanka above 38%. So this is the left-hand side graph, and the right-hand side graph is in terms of changes. Again, the most comparable in terms of the subnational is 2015 towards 2005-8 versus 2015-18. And in that period, most of the numbers on the change on the right-hand side are negative. So there has been a lot. Again, if we have data comparable and we look at more recent data, there may be an uptick. But this is to say that internationally, but even within countries, there doesn't seem to be any immediately clear bright spots. So how do we, this to motivate, how do we go about analyzing this issue? So we address this issue broadly with this set of questions. The first one, as Franziska mentioned, we want to focus our attention to the untapped potential, the lost benefit of having more women to work. And I will start there. And then once we fix ideas of the enormous cost of not taking this opportunity, we show why labor force participation is low. What are the issues on the demand side? What are the issues on supply and frictions? And then this, which is also on, if you wish, more on the supply side, the impact of social norms and the legal environment. So let's start with the first one. I want to skip the data for the sake of time, but we can go back to that, which has been quite an effort to put together the data, and we hopefully quite a bit of it is available for people if they want to use it. Okay, let's start with this, the macro cost of not involving more women in the labor market. The left-hand side graph shows results at the aggregate level for the whole region. First is just the GDP level as an index for this recent year. And then we have a simulated change, sets of experiment of what would happen if we were able to bring female labor force participation at par with male labor force participation. So it's a huge experiment, okay? Because we go from 1/3 to 3/4. So it's and it's not that it's under control of the policy. This is an endogenous variable. So it's not that, but we have to think of this as a sort of a thought experiment. Imagine that we could bring them in. The impact will be very, very large. We calculate that using a set of 8 variants of basically 2 main models, one being based on a production function, and the other one being basically an occupational choice model. The first, the production function gives us, you basically take more worker, put them into production function, and you get some output. The other one looks more at what has happened in examples in the past of countries that have been able to increase the female labor force participation, what were the choices of female, and simulate that with South Asia. So those are the 2 philosophies behind these simulations. But to simplify the story for now, the shock would be at the maximum almost 51%. So GDP would go up by 51% in the region. And the range at the minimum would be 13%. Why is there such a big range? Mainly because it depends on two factors. The first, the first is whether productivity of new entrants goes down or stays the same. And that depends obviously of whether women have the tools to work. So if capital stock goes in sync, increase in sync with the entry of new women, their productivity doesn't go down. And so that helps getting the large impact. And the second one is if in the models you start disaggregating sectors and types of occupation, and you allow women to enter occupations that are normally reserved to men, and they normally are in occupations that are more productive. But if you allow this segregation to disappear and women have access to any jobs, then also it helps going towards the top. If these two factors are not at work, you tend to reduce the impact. Now on the right hand side, you have the disaggregated country level impact, and again you have all the 8 variants of these two models. And obviously there is still a big discrepancy, but what you learn from looking at the other graph is that the bigger the shock, or the bigger the initial gap between men and women, the bigger the bang for having them to work. So the 3 big countries in the region, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, are the one that stands to gain the most, and are the one that weight the most in the region. So this hopefully very quickly we can discuss for a whole hour on this, but this is should put on the table for policymakers. Look, you leave a lot of money on the table if you don't have these wins. So they should get interested in the issue, and that's a little bit the hook that we want to bait them. So now, if so much is available, such a large gain is possible, what can we do? Why is not possible to get there? And so we start by tackling this issue by looking at the demand side. And by demand side, we consider what are the opportunities created for women to enter the market. And these opportunities come normally from the changing in the structure of an economy, from development itself. And we focus on 3 structural changes that may, in theory, favor increased demand for women. Those are urbanization, specialization, and openness, openness trade. This first graph shows you that indeed both these 3 changes, these 3 structural changes are creating demand. Why is that? I need to guide you a little bit here. So we have, as I said, we have these data from late 80s to 2000 and actually even further back, vis-a-vis what I showed earlier, to 2022. Micro data, okay? And we can calculate from these several rounds, we can calculate the wage rate for women and for men who are working either urban locations or rural location, either in services or non-services, and either in exportables or non-tradables. And for each of these wage of men and women, we calculate the wage gap, the ratio, the premium of men over women. Okay, that is on average in the region about 60%. So a woman earns 60% of the wage of a man, and these are the differences of these wage gaps, men versus women, in these sectors. So if you are a woman vis-a-vis a man in urban areas, you earn these about 2 percentage points more than if you are a woman and a man in a rural area. And the same in services, the same in exports. So basically in these sectors or locations, the wage of women is closer to the wage of men, which means that there is indeed more demand for them. Yes.
And the comparison is with respect to the average in all cases, or to the other sector, like the urban is?
No, we have co-founder controls, so it comes from a regression analysis. So we eliminate the
Is that coefficients in the regression?
Yeah, we as much as possible try to eliminate the co-founders of age, education, and stuff like that. So that's an important qualifier. Yes. Now, so this is just to introduce you the fact that, okay, so when the economies move towards these more urbanization, more tertiarization, there is demand for women, and it's shown by their premia getting smaller vis-a-vis men, or getting their wages lower. So now that's on the price. Let's look at on the quantity. What happens to participation itself? Let's look at the quantity. And here I start with urbanization. Okay, so let's start with the right-hand side graph. This is for the world and other emerging markets and developing economies. This is a cross-section regression, actually a panel regression. We have repeated cross-sections for countries, 140, I don't remember the exact number, for a couple of decades. And what we find is that, yes, for the world as a whole, or for other emerging economy, emerging market development economy, the correlation between urbanization and participation is positive, but not for South Asia, okay? And this one is actually estimated with the subnational. So to estimate this, we estimated as if now we focus just on South Asia, and the small subunit of every country becomes our unit of observation, and within South Asia we don't find that. But that's mainly because of what you see on the left-hand side, which is this large premium in participation in rural areas. So that's the difference in female labor participation in rural versus urban, and it's massive and very large, and it's not due to the fact that in urban areas, households are richer, and therefore there's an income effect, and therefore the women don't need to work because as much as in rural areas, because when we control for the household wage, you go from 16 to 11, but it's still fairly significant. And so I'll talk more about this in a moment, but that's the first thing. Or you have a question?
So do I read correctly that the rural female labor force participation is 15 percentage points higher than the?
Yes.
That's that agriculture thing, right?
Yes. Okay, so the second piece is tertiarization. So here, same kind of estimation type on the right-hand side. But let me start first to really just show you a graph with female labor participation across sectors, differentiating the other emerging economy vis-a-vis South Asia, the diamonds versus the bronze. And if you look at two or three wholesale, retail sectors and hospitality, maybe a little bit of the public sectors, which is public service, education, health. Countries, non-SAR countries, have a very large participation of women, but not so much South Asia. So even if these expand, even if the whole economy turns towards more tertiary, it's if you don't do anything here to increase the intensity of use, you don't get these effects, which are positive or at least non-negative, as in South Asia. Now, I haven't said one important thing about these two structural changes, and that is that while there has been quite a bit of urbanization and quite a bit of tertiarization, South Asia started from a very low base, and so it's not that necessarily more urbanization and more tertiarization is bad for female labor. Maybe that hasn't been enough. Okay, so there's that story. Now, I finish off with the third one, which is openness, which is in fact the exception. Now, openness is where we see an effect on female labor force participation. And again, two graphs similar to the previous ones. Now, this is only for South Asia. And we again see when we classify sectors according to their tradability, we find that there is a strong positive impact on expansion of exports, which is tempered by increase in imports. So when imports increase, if import flows increase, there is also some negative impact on female labor participation vis-a-vis male labor participation. But in terms of export, is fairly large, the impact, and it's connected. One mechanism that is mentioned often in the literature is the competition level, which is basically the fact that firms that are exporting, they cannot afford to be non-competitive. And if women with the same level of productivity of men are 60% cheaper, 40% cheaper, why not using more women? So that's a clear winner. And this shows the same type of information as before. What is the intensity of use of women in these sectors? And you can see that is way higher for exports and imports when compared to the non-tradable, which is here. So it's almost twice as more women than non-tradable they use these sectors. So again, as before, there has been urbanization, there has been tertiarization, there has been reduction in tariff in the last 30 or so years, but not as much. And I'll show a graph here where, which is from our macro friends, which is shows you how at the macro level how close these countries are still. In terms of trade and in terms of net FDI, net capital inflows, FDIs, all the countries, apart from these smaller one, all the big ones are well in the bottom 25% of the distribution of openness and to trade and to FDI. And again, even if I said there has been liberalization, the policy stance towards opening up is not so open. There's still a lot to do, and therefore, when we want if you put together all the pieces, openness seems to be the one that has some real bite in terms of increasing female labor participation, but we don't have enough of that. So there's a potential double dividend if we do the two things together. Okay, so now let's move from the demand side to something that is more on the supply side. And I'm gonna go quickly here. I don't know how I'm doing with time, but I'm doing fine. More or less, okay, good. So on on the supply side, we start off with something that is often mentioned and discussed, which is are women as skilled, as educated as men? And so we look at education, we looked at fertility, which is not here, but if you look at this graph on education, or in terms of completion of primary, and again here, there's a lot of pieces of data here, but it shows the difference of men and women completion rate in primary in 2 periods of time, South Asia versus other countries. And what you see is that the dramatic improvement, and in some ways even the overcoming of overpassing of women vis-a-vis men. So women complete even more than men primary in most countries, but there's some, Pakistan is not there yet. And this is good news. If we were to do this graph for secondary, it's not exactly the same. There's still some road to go, but it's certainly the progress there has been very large, and so it doesn't seem that education is the key issue for holding back women. Fertility has come down as well, so it's close to replacement rate in the region. So it's not that they have too many children that they cannot work or participate. But something that is shown here is that maybe still the burden of taking care of them is not alleviated by the provision of childcare. There's some evidence on this at the micro level, which is cast some doubt on just providing more healthcare and childcare will solve this problem, but it's clearly not there yet in the region. I'm gonna skip this for now and move to. I can talk about this maybe in the policy potential solution of what to do about it. But let me move to one big part of the chapter where we look at supply side story. Okay, let's start with this graph that is bringing us back to what I was discussing about urbanization. Now, on the left-hand side, the first graph shows you the same deltas, the same differences between gender wage gaps between men and women in rural and urban. And apart from Bangladesh, which is a case apart, which we are still investigating exactly the reasons, this was the 2% that I showed you before for the whole region, and now these are the effects for all the other countries. So we have a price signal, we have a market signal, as you read on the title of this slide, the social norms override the labor market signal. So we have a price signal that there is in urban areas, there are opportunities, there is demand for women, and their wages is going closer to them. But if we look at the labor force participation in urban versus rural, there is the reverse that we observe, that the price signal is not creating increasing female labor participation in urban areas, but actually is below what it is in rural areas. And this notwithstanding the fact that social norms are looser in urban versus rural areas. So, but what one tricky thing with constraints from social norms in urban areas is because of the composition of the labor market. What is to get a job, in urban areas for women means most of the time working not as self-employed or unpaid as in rural areas, but working outside the house in a wage work, etc. So because of that, the challenge against the norm is more direct. Okay? So women can work at home, and in fact, there is even a very interesting study on at the micro level of working from home in urban areas in India that shows the same stories. That if you are able to work from home, you don't have to challenge directly the norm. You can still maybe be close to your children and not be seen by society as taking the lead and taking the position of the breadwinner, which is held clearly by men. So that's an interesting story that shows you the power of something that is not, economists don't necessarily look often, but that is clearly overriding what we look often, which are price signals. And here now I show you a bit of how we measure social norms, and we have and the closely related issue of the laws protecting women's rights. So on the left-hand side, we show the level of social norms for a specific norm, which is the answer to a question such as even if you could help, does your husband have to have the role of the main breadwinner? And this is a direct question that is what we call the personal belief. Do you believe? Do you agree with this statement? And then the social expectation is, what do you think 10 of your peers, out of 10 of your peers, how many you think agree with that statement? So that's a second order belief. What do you think the society thinks about this issue? And as you can see, compared to the emerging market and development economies, all the big countries are well above that. And there is always a gap also between what is the personal expectation and the societal expectations. And that, shown by Cristina Bicchieri, us in other papers, etc., is the more constraining, the social rather than your own personal belief. I have to go deeper in there, but trust me on this. There is quite a bit of interesting research on this, and so that's on the measurement of norms. On the measurement of what is the legal environment is this legal environment conducive to women be able to participate? And so we look at the women, business and the law, which has been accumulated evidence on the jure situation. What are the laws on the books for several types of domain, which go from inheritance parity to discrimination in labor market, to divorce and household rights, and discrimination in education. So there's mobility, there are various domains, and this is the aggregate indicator. Again, in this that measures all the laws in the book as an index, and so the blue bars are the jure situation, this band is the euro situation for the rest of the world in terms of emerging market and development economies. And most countries in South Asia are well below, again, in the bottom quartile. Even though, again, starting from very low base, there has been quite a bit of progress. This graph also shows you one new thing that has been done this year only, began this year, which is the implementation framework for the laws. So they have tried to measure not only what is the euro, what is on the book, but how easy it is for this law to have a bite on the ground. So that's what they call implementation framework. Think of a simple one, mobility. Where men and women by law have the same right to have a passport, but to have a passport, if you have to have an application form which has a signature of and a consenting husband, then the law on the book of the right, protecting the right is okay, but the actual having a passport is not that easy. So that's what this implementation framework measures. And again, this is the median for the rest of the world, and the diamonds are for South Asia. And again, there is quite a bit way to go there. Now, this is the stating. What is the impact of these on female labor participation? You have two graphs on there. First, on the left is an augmented U curve where we have female labor force participation as a function of GDP squared, and augmented by these two elements, the legal index that I showed you and the social expectation. We also have implementation and personal belief, but I'll show you results later. But the personal belief don't count. Yes.
At the country level.
At the country level, yes. This is across country. So it's not. It's not done at the micro level yet. No. And the coefficient, these are the coefficients from the regression, and it's positive and significant for improving the legal index, and negative and significant for these restrictions from the social norms. The right-hand side shows you the impact that when you measure, when you multiply that by the actual level of these variables in the countries. And while it seems that the coefficients is bigger for legal index than social expectation, given where countries are in terms of their social expectation and legal, the net effect is, yes, the effect is always one is positive and the other is negative, but together the norms count more than the legal index. So you need to, if you want to start from somewhere, it may be improving the social norms, which is not easy, but it's what will produce some more impact starting off. Now, I have, well, yes, let me go quickly here, then I have, I'm almost done, I think, yes. So I mentioned that there is this implementation gap story measurement in the new World Women Business and Law Index, and there's a very long debate of whether norms are influences the laws or vice versa, laws influence the norm. And establishing causality is very, very hard, and we don't want to go there. But what we review the literature and discuss a little bit the literature, and the report is an interesting literature, not just by economists, by the way, but what we end up doing is something fairly simple, and we have looked whether the social norms, both personal belief or social expectation, are influencing the implementation gap. So whether you pass good laws, but then you are not implementing them, is influenced by the social norms environment. And what we find is that yes, there is that sense. This this again seems that this is more important, but this one is moving from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile. There is the interquartile range is much larger for personal leave than social expectations. So that's why this looks larger than that. But if you were to look at the coefficients, it is the reverse. But yes, there is, bottom line is that there is a strong, positive, significant correlations in deficit in implementation with restrictiveness of the social norms environment. And I can tell you examples of many examples of good laws passed, but then they don't produce the impact that is expected. On inheritance in India, on inheritance on Pakistan, we have a very interesting project on that it wasn't even gender related, it was the digitalization of the cadastre of land ownership in Pakistan, and that was supposedly helping with all the inheritance of the land, and it did help, and it did help also women, daughters, which have parity in terms of getting their pieces of land from their parents. And there was more inheritance going on when the law was implemented. But at the same time, there were other things happening. One was that women received less in dowry, and women were married earlier with lower quality husbands. So there are a lot of things that happen behind the scene that even if you inherit something more easily, there are other ways that society goes around these laws. Okay, so that tells you a little bit of story here. Now, to finish with one more piece of evidence, then I very quickly go through the policies. So this is interesting research that is connected to all that I have been saying, and it's about trying to figure out whether there is a marriage premium on top of or independently of the child premium in terms of women engagement in the labor market. So that if you read research on gender inequality in high-income countries, one pain point for women is they have earned a lot of parity in many areas, but one pain point is that they get penalty in the labor market in terms of participation and wages when they have children. So they get out of the labor market and they pay them. But what we look here is, no, okay, is there a penalty for just simply being married, not even having children? And the answer is yes. You see, this is an event study, and what you see is that before the marriage, there is no difference, obviously, but after the marriage, we distinguish women that have children versus women that are married but don't have children, and it's significant and important. At least the red diamond. That the marriage punishes you in terms of participation, even without having children. This is a qualifier of that premium when we look at the heterogeneous effect. So when you have less agency, there is, for example, there is more domestic violence. This negative premium is even larger. When you are educated, this goes down a little. Okay, and this one is connected to what I was saying about the urban areas. The fact that you get educated and you have this wage gap smaller, it doesn't guarantee you to go into the labor market, but it may guarantee you to have a good husband. And so there is evidence also that the premium in the marriage market has been increasing. So you look at the gradient of husband wage and women education, and the gradient is increasing, okay, in terms of cross section, but also in terms of time. So there has been an increase of that. And again, it's important because women in South Asia, India, live in a patrilocal society. So when they get married, they move with the in-laws of the family of their husband, and they lose the network, which is something that was useful decades ago because it was a form of insurance for her family to have children married away because of shocks. So it was a form of insurance. But in the current environment, it prevents women to have a network through which many times they find jobs. So I can go on, but let me tell you quickly something about the policy implication. So this is the weak part of the talk because it's rather complicated to unbundle all these different causes or different factors that affect the female labor force situation to be able to identify, okay, let's focus on this, and this will produce a big effect. So what you have here is a menu of many different things that you have to do on the demand side, on the supply side, and on the legal environment. So I touched on the fact that you need to transform, increase participation in growth. You need capital markets to work and provide the tools to the women. On the demand side, we have discussed the fact that while there are positive impacts from, for example, from openness, but not so much on urbanization or tesselization, maybe you need more urbanization, more tesselization to see those effects, and you certainly need more openness. On the supply side, we touched upon these issues of childcare, and we were discussing this morning with the CDO about the fact that in Sri Lanka they have decided to eliminate restriction to women to work in certain sectors or work after a certain hour. So that seems simple. Again, these were protective legislation. Women were not permitted to work after 7 p.m. because it was dark and it was dangerous. But maybe now it's not needed anymore. And then I talked about a lot about culture and laws. This is not necessarily long-term things. That there is a lot of interesting research which shows that things can move fairly quickly on those fronts as well. And it doesn't mean really going into paternalistic attitude towards changing the culture of countries. It means simply sometimes informing people of opportunities and informing people that they have just the wrong perception of what is the standing of society on certain issues that are not discussed enough. That's simply that. And I'm stopping there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for a very, very interesting summary of what seems like a huge amount of work over several years. The floor is now open for all our audience to ask questions.
So I always have questions. Can you go back to that slide where you had the zeros and everything with the other one? This one. So that the zeros there on the left before marriage, that's a normalization, right? That's not that the gap between men and women is zero. That's a normalization.
Yes. What do you mean by normalization?
That's the gap of women married and not married. Before they're married, they're not married.
Yes.
So that's a full pool of women.
It's the gap.
That's the difference. That's the difference in employment rate Yeah, they're, so.
Not very clear title, is it difference in
No,
employment
yes,
rate before
yes.
and after marriage? Okay, between married and unmarried
Yes,
women.
correct.
So
Correct.
before they're
Yes,
married or
yes,
same.
Makes sense.
yes, right.
But you know, this is really important because when we started this, everyone was saying, the World Bank says that too, childcare. But it has nothing to do with childcare. It's
They're
not
not,
marriage.
they're not children. It's-
And I'm gonna leave it a moment, so then, but on these norms, right?
Yes.
You focus on this breadwinner
Yes.
thing, man, male. Is there in the survey, are there in the surveys questions about would you, to the man, would you allow your wife to go and work away from the house? Or, you know, it seems to me that one of the huge things, and I'm speaking out of ignorance here, there are many people here that know much more than me. One of the huge things is this idea that you expose the entire household to shame if your woman is, the woman in the house is seen or looked at, or men can talk to them, and all of this is terribly inappropriate, and all of the brothers' honors is affected by this. But then people are, you know, you're not gonna go anywhere to work if that's the thing. So this is a very profound social norm. It's much more than, oh, should men be the breadwinners or not? So I'm just
No, yes.
wondering whether you have any empirical handle on that.
Yes, we do. So we have been measuring, we have been designing a questionnaire tool and instrument for measuring social norms, and we have been testing in collected data in Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, which is, I haven't showed you results there, but to build that instrument, you go in stages. First, you do a qualitative type of investigation where you have you talk to people in an open way of what are the impediments for women to participate. What is your household think about this, and then you listen to the discussion and then try to figure out what are the various topics. So we did that for 5 countries in the region, and there are areas that then we build the quantitative instrument around. One area is having young children and having the woman being able to either count on her own taking care of them or some relative that can, but giving away the children to for a non-household relative is something that is quite taboo. So that goes into the childcare problem in a way, right? So childcare is one issue. The second is the type of jobs that a woman can do. So every people we have talked about, if the woman can work in a female only or non-mixed workplace, or can work in a public sector, then there is much less concern. So the type of job is important. Then another area is does the man has some issue of his own? It's a health issue, is a widow, so all of these are important qualifier for a woman not being shamed if she goes out. There's one other area that we have been measuring more carefully is that, okay, what are the sanctions if you go against the norm? Is it the sanction is it that the husband will be teased by his friends, to the whole family get banned from a village, or police will come, which is a true case. The police come to the village and start harassing the family for that.
So fired.
So yes, so there is the sanctions, and then not only what are the sanctions, but what are the sanctioneers. So we are able to measure that. And then the other one is another area that is important to figure out when you measure these things is who are the relevant pressure group of society. Is it just a family, just your husband and your in-laws, or the extended family, or the neighbors? So it varies depending on what is the type of norm that is. Is it going to work, or is it leaving the children, or what it is? So these peer pressure group change, the geometry change. So it's work in progress. It's difficult to measure all of this, but we are having a much better handle now in terms of seeing the intensity of the restriction of the norm, where it comes from, who is pressuring it, and what is the ultimate connection with the participation itself. Because we measure in this survey, we have a labor participation module, and then all these other measures of social norms, and we are able to connect it. So yes, sure. Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
First of all, thank you, sir, for sharing this. And I have a question a little bit similar to
Franziska,
Thank you, professors. Because I'm wondering that the number 0, in that diagram that you showed.
Yes.
Does it apply to I mean the urban area women and the rural area women in India? Because that I assume that there can be possibilities of differences in employment rate among the rural women and the urban women in India, because that based on my very little knowledge of Indian society, that I know that there's many factors can affect to the women's situations in, yes, for example, the caste or the other, I don't know, religious factors or something.
Yes.
And because I'm a woman from China, and based on my observations in Chinese society, that there is obvious, difference among, the rural women and urban women in their social positions and economic, socio-economic positions or many aspects. That, yeah. So
no, I understand
so,
where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering that when you're talking about Indian women, so as if there is a whole of Indian women.
Yeah, but I can answer, I think. Okay, so this one is, you have to think of this as an experiment, not as the difference of different group of women in terms of their participation. You have to think of, let's imagine a possibility of, I don't know, what is your name? Marie gets married, and does she get out of the labor force by yes or not? And the other one that I compare to is Marie doesn't get married. So it's not, this one is we compare women as close as possible to one another. So they have to be the same age, the same education, the same caste. And then we compare, one gets married and one doesn't. And so, but before getting married are almost, you have to think of them as almost is the same woman. That's what is the idea of identification, causal identification, is that you have to think of this as an experiment. So I compare randomly one goes and one doesn't, but they have before the random draw, they are the same. They are not distinguishable in terms of caste.
I should know this, but do we control for urban rural?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
one.
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the informative presentation. I have a question. I was wondering, how we control those female workers that work illegally, since it's against the social norms like women in the job. So
Mhm.
what if they work like illegally?
But what do you mean illegally is that?
Like,
Do you mean informal?
yeah, informal.
Informal,
we-
I think informal, yeah.
So in the survey, when at the individual, at the micro level, at the individual level, when you are asked whether you work or not, you answer yes or no first. So that's the first count of this person as participating and being employed versus not being participating. Then there is a second. There are a few more questions. Which occupation you're in, which sectors you're in. Do you have a contract or you not have a contract? And then according to that, we can classify first you have a first fork where participate, doesn't participate. When there's participation, then it can be, I don't know if illegal, but it can be without a contract or with a contract, and or in a firm that is a formal firms or self-employed, and so on and so forth. So, but I'm not in these countries. I don't know if you're thinking of, I don't know, the U.S. Market, labor market, Mexican illegal, Mexican in the U.S. Do they count in the participation of calculation of labor force office? I'm not sure, but there isn't that.
So in a separate study, we had looked at informality, and 90% of employed are informally employed.
Right.
So I suspect the numbers here, they include 90% of them include the informally employed.
Okay.
But informal employment is such a fuzzy thing. It can be a contract, no contract. It can be formal in a firm. It can be without a contract in a formal firm.
Yes.
It's a very fuzzy contract concept. And here, so many of these women are self-employed, unpaid. That is probably all informal, no?
Indeed.
As a first order approximation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
But it's a question we get asked a lot. It's a tricky one because there's no category here.
Yeah.
In the survey. We have to kind of interpret.
No, and there is the whole evaluation of the care that women provide inside the house. There is no immediate market value, but if we move from 1/3 of women active in the labor market to 3/4, as I said, these women probably stop doing a lot of things that they were doing at home, or they work for 24 hours. And so there is, from a welfare perspective, even if there is no price of taking care of educating your children or taking care of the old grandparents, etc. In welfare terms, it's not obvious that the GDP increase is not compensated by some loss of welfare for some housing. So it's tricky. And if you talk to feminist economists, they said that there is a problem in the national accounts. We should account for all this work. It's another story.
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, are there any particular sectors in South Asia where you see the greatest potential for women's employment growth, or like any sectors in which it's easier to reduce the gap in?
Well, yes, as I was discussing earlier on, export-oriented sectors, which can be in manufacturing, but also services. So the sectors that are exposed to high degree of competition, that competition is somehow the antidote to discrimination. So the more a sector is organized in a competitive manner, the more firms have to take advantage of the fact that women are still cheaper vis-a-vis men, even if they are as productive. So that's one. The other one that I discussed is these service sectors, hospitality, retail, etc. However, I think it's a bit dangerous to think of, are there any female jobs because women are as good as men to do most things. And so you don't want to think of, okay, is there anything that the women can do? Because then it becomes tricky. So we don't want to go there too much. I don't know if Franziska, you want to ask.
You know, we see that already. I mean, obviously the call centers are famous. They employ only women. The garment factories are famous. They employ only women. The new Foxconn in southern India that's setting up a new factory, only women. And these are all the export sectors that Maurizio talked about. But you know, the things that are not so obvious is, for example, in Bangladesh, there is a big push to install solar panels for renewable energy, because the grid doesn't work. So by having a solar panel, you become less reliant on the grid. These things require wiping all the time because the air is dirty. So guess who's doing the wiping? It's the women. This is essentially the women taking over the whole maintenance of these solar panels. And it's like a mini engineering job. It's not trivial to do. So we can see today where the women are. What will come next is impossible to do, but the beauty of competition is there will be something. There will be something. They will find pockets and niches where there's a lot of money to be made by exploiting a wage premium, essentially, or wage gap, sorry, no, inverse wage premium.
Yes. Yeah.
Any questions? I have a small question. In fact, I'd like to sort of dig more into, this looks like a huge amount of work you've done, and I'm sure there's more stuff which you haven't been able to present. And I was curious to know if you have any regional, I'm sure you do, regional differences in the marriage premium. So by country, or even across, say, the large countries by region, and also by religion, maybe caste,
Yeah.
levels of education. That could be interesting to know.
Okay, so, no, you finished on it.
Yes, yeah.
So this one was done for Bangladesh, India, Maldives, and Nepal
Okay.
from DHS data, because the demographic and health survey data, because they have repeated cross-section and have data on pre and post-marriage.
Yes.
And yes, we have variations within these countries in terms of these characteristics that I was mentioning maybe super quickly. But when there is things like more agency, the premium is reduced. When there is more education, the premium is reduced. When it's urban, the premium is reduced, and things like that. In terms of the DHS has a geolocation, so you can, it's one of the few surveys where you can pinpoint where exactly a woman is. But to do this, we needed to construct a pseudo panel, because we need to follow through time a person that before was not married and then got married, and to see that there is a change. So I'm not sure we can do a lot of regional stuff, because then you start cutting these little cells, have too few observations, and everything becomes a bit noisy. But ideally, instead of using pseudo panel, which is group of individuals that are born in the same year, and then you follow as they age, you would have two panels where you follow any individual as he or she, in this case, ages. But here we follow groups. If you have, there are very few real panel in the region, so we can't use the.
We got a variant of your question we always often get. So you were interpreting it as subnational regional, but you could also think of it as supranational regional, East Asia, for example, also Latin American.
Yeah.
So what is normal, basically? What is 12% normal? Is that high? Is that low? And apparently there is no other literature. There is lots of literature on the child premium or penalty.
Yeah.
The marriage penalty, there I think
Studied.
No,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we were the first.
there is some in high income countries.
Yes.
That they have begun doing it, but
That's what
it's a couple of no, they're not cited here. There are a couple of papers that have been written on the marriage penalty recently in high income countries. This is certainly the first for
development.
Yeah, for any development.
Yes.
Because it's a really massive premium. And
Yeah.
I know all of my aunties, after they got married, that was it.
Yes,
And they all have PhDs, they're all scientists.
yes.
And I've never asked them, what happened? Why did you drop your careers? It's
My
fantastic.
Italian man says, oh, I left the office for you. So, yes, it's obvious when you have a child, though, it's obvious that
Sure.
the burden, you have something to do, but why these women that have no children are signaling? Are they signaling that they are good wives that they can take care of them, and so they don't want to get distracted by jobs? And so we are trying to dig a bit deeper in this, we have a working paper with digging a little deeper. What is the reason why the marriage but not having children is carrying such a burden?
Maybe they're doing it in anticipation that the
That's-
in-laws will expect that
Yeah,
once they
You-
have.
You
the
sure you're
child,
prepared,
they-
you're
yes.
prepared to have children and take care of them as well as your husband. You are a good wife.
Goodbye.
So there is a cost, a utility cost to break the norm.
Yeah.
So,
Also had another thought. Did you have any questions in the questionnaire about women experiencing discrimination at the workplace? Like, was that a factor, for example, for educated women or women in urban areas?
if we ask them whether they themselves perceive being discriminated.
Yeah. Like they applied for a job and, the guys got it and she didn't. Men got the job.
No, not in the, not directly like that, no. There is, I believe the World Value Survey, but I'm not 100% sure, or whether it is a specific survey for India, but I know Ashwini Deshpande had shown some evidence where there's to the answer, if there were a job, would you want to work? Which is different from you applied and you didn't get it. But if she used that evidence to say, oh, it's a demand issue story, maybe. Because look, whenever these women are asked if there were an opportunity to work, they normally say yes. So that's.
So that's from the women's point of view, but from the firm's point of view, we actually have the RCT
Yes.
in Pakistan.
Right. Yes, no.
Would you hire a woman? Would you dream of hiring a woman?
Oh, no, there is a ton of evidence in terms of even the language used for advertising jobs
Oh, wow.
is definitely biased towards either explicitly we want a male engineer or there is some bias. There is no our facilities are located far away from the city or I don't there's papers that analyze language of advertisement and it's biased heavily against towards men. The firm's perspective, yes, indeed.
I have one more small tiny question. If no one else has any questions, I'll go for it.
Cool.
In your experience from this project, what do you think explains the decline that you've observed in female labor force participation in South Asia?
The decline.
Yeah.
The decline depends what the decline has been more in the basically India reached out to 20, I think 18 was it was at 18%, but it is becoming up. So when you say decline I'm not sure I have a definitive answer for that. It is, nor we have been able to really investigate in detail what is behind the recent increase. what happens is that for example, for the recent increase that the government is very keen on, if you look, if you scratch the surface, is that a lot of it comes from unpaid or rural jobs rather than urban. So there has been much increase in urban areas, which are a problem when you want to urbanize. You have to create space there. So it's different things that happen, and depending on which area of the country you look at, which sector you look at. So yeah.
I think that the biggest, the really only candidate explanation can be that U-shaped, the U-curve, that you can justify the decline. And the increase, I mean, informally, if you talk to people, the increase is meaningless because the surveying has changed. They count now what they didn't get to count.
Yes.
So I'm not sure it's a genuine increase. It's very obvious in the data.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't argue, it doesn't seem like it, but you wouldn't argue that the decrease was a measurement issue either. It doesn't, I don't think.
No, the decrease,
It was a genuine
that was a
decrease.
genuine decrease, and maybe it was the powerful U-curve. But the increase is, I'm not sure. It's increased since 2017, right? 18, when we changed, changed the survey, and now they seem to be increasingly counting people they didn't used to count. That's why it's all unpaid family work in rural areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, please, go ahead, Maureen.
Sorry, I have the last tiny question that I remember that the professor mentioned that in one slide, the female employment composition in rural and urban areas. And I think I noticed that many rural women, they are self-employed. So can you elaborate a little bit more about how they are self-employed, and are they selling agricultural products, for example, or they're running, I don't know, small business or something that you describe it as self.
Okay, so yes, it's all right. So that's the standard. As I said, we use the standard ILO labor force survey method, and so the start off of that module is whether you have been working in the last week. Then is about how many hours continuously or temporary. Then it's it's the status of your occupation. Are you an employee, or are you an employer, or are you working on your own? And so the self-employed is almost a residual that is, and then there is also this unpaid family helper in the family. So there's also that category. To then figure out what a self-employed person does, you have to look at cross that with the occupation and sector. So you are a self-employed, you are a doctor in urban areas, so you are a professional, etc. You are self-employed in rural areas. You can be having your plot of land and grow stuff that you sell. We don't know enough. It's a very large group, which you can, as I said, you can look at rural area, agriculture. If you are in rural areas, in agriculture or non-agriculture, within agriculture, which subsector you are. So there are ways of slicing it, but at the level we were looking at, it certainly is distinguished if you employ other people, if you are an employer. So if you are self-employed, it's different from you are an employer, which you are also self-employed, but you are employing other people. So that's the distinctions there. But the majority, I believe, are just self-subsistence farmers. The majority, probably, yes.
Thank you for your explanation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I guess we've had a very nice round of questions and a fantastic presentation of some absolutely excellent work. Thank you so much for your talk and for coming all the way to share your findings with us. Thank you to all our audience, and we look forward to seeing you again for our next research seminar whenever it's announced. Thank you so much.
Thanks.